Ram.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatiruttama-shloke Bhaktir-bhavati Naishtike Om Jnana-Nandasya Jnana-Shalakhaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri-Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 9, Brahma's Prayers for Creative Energy. We are reading text 36. So, being pleased with prayers of Brahmaji and the submission of Brahma, austerity of Brahmaji, here the Supreme Lord is now instructing Brahmaji here. So, we are at text 36. One second. ज्ञातोऽहं भवता तेन
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, you are not audible.
Prabhuji, we can't hear you.
How to break a bad habit. So, am I audible?
Now, yes.
Yes,
Yes,
okay.
Prabhuji.
So, text 36. ज्ञातोऽहं भवता त्वद्य दुर्विज्ञेयोऽपि देहिनां यन्वां त्वं मन्यसे युक्तं भूतेन्द्रियगुणात्मभिः. Translation.
Although I am not easily knowable by the conditioned soul, you have known me today because you know that my personality is not constituted of anything material and specifically not of the five gross and three subtle elements. Purport. Knowledge of the supreme absolute truth does not necessitate negation of the material manifestation but understanding of spiritual existence as it is. To think that because material existence is realized in forms, therefore spiritual existence must be formless is only a negative material conception of spirit. The real spiritual conception is that spiritual form is not material form. Brahma appreciated the eternal form of the Lord in that way, and the personality of Godhead approved of Brahma's spiritual conception. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord condemned the material conception of Krishna's body, which arises because he is apparently present like a man. The Lord may appear in any of his many, many spiritual forms, but he is not materially composed, nor has he any difference between body and self. That is the way of conceiving the spiritual form of the Lord. Hare Krishna.
So the Supreme Lord says, I am not easily knowable by conditioned souls, but you have known me that my personality is not anything material and especially not the five gross and the three subtle elements. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the knowledge of the spiritual doesn't mean negation of the material. So, unless we come out of that thought process that something is material and the material attributes and the spiritual attributes will be opposite to each other, one cannot understand the Supreme Lord. So people think matter means shape, so the spirit must be formless. Matter means and the form means limit, so unlimited must be without a form. So what they mistake is they mistake to understand there is a spiritual form as well. So negation of matter is not spirit. That is the basic fault of the Mayavadis, who just go on saying neti, 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 but they do not understand the spirit in the positive sense. And here Lord says, my dear Brahma, because you have understood this very well, therefore I am known by you. Text 37. तुभ्यं मत विचिकित्सित्सायाम् आत्मा मे दर्शितोर्बहि नालेन सलिले मूलं पुष्करस्य विचिन्वतः. Translation.
Translation. When you were contemplating whether there was a source to the stem of the lotus of your birth, and you even entered into that stem, you could not trace out anything. But at the time I manifested my form from within, purport, the personality of Godhead can be experienced only by his causeless mercy, not by mental speculation or with the help of the material senses. Material senses cannot approach the transcendental understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He can be appreciated only by submissive devotional service when he reveals himself before the devotee. Only by love of Godhead can one know God and not otherwise. The personality of Godhead cannot be seen with the material eyes, but he can be seen from within by spiritual eyes opened by the ointment of love of Godhead. As long as one's spiritual eyes are closed due to the dirty covering of matter, one cannot see the Lord. But when the dirt is removed by the process of devotional service, one can see the Lord without a doubt. Brahma's personal endeavor to see the root of the lotus pipe failed, but when the Lord was satisfied by his penance and devotion, he revealed himself from within with no external endeavor. Hare Krishna.
So the Lord recalls, when you were contemplating what is the source and what is your source, you entered the stem of the lotus, but you were unable to understand me, O Brahma. But now I am pleased with your endeavors and I have manifested before you. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that the personality of Godhead can be realized only by his causeless mercy. Somewhere else, Prabhupada writes that the Lord reserves the right to reveal to somebody who challenges his authority, because he is the personality. And thus, only by submissive devotional service, Bhaktyamam Abhijanati, the Lord is revealed before his devotees. So Prabhupada says for this, one has to remove the material covering over the eyes. What is the material covering? Material covering is the problem in the Sambandha Gyan. Thinking I am the body, aham mameti, I am the enjoyer. This is the material covering. And when the material covering is purified by understanding that I am the spirit soul, part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and my Nitya Swarupa is to be loving servant of the Supreme Lord, and realizing which Shastra Chakshu, by studying the scriptures, by practicing one sadhana, one will actually remove, Prabhupada says here, the dirt on the material eyes. And thus the eyes will be imbued with the Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santah Sadaiv Hridayeshu Vilokayanti. And then one can see the Lord everywhere. So, Lord was pleased with the penance and the devotion of Brahmaji, and now he revealed himself in front of Brahma from within without any external endeavors. So what this means is the endeavor in devotional service, they automatically will reveal the Supreme Lord. Text 38. यच्चकर्थम् अङ्गमत्स्तोत्रं अभ्युदयाङ्कितं यद्वा तपसि ते निष्ठा स एष मत् अनुग्रहः. Translation.
O Brahma, the prayers that you have chanted, praising the glories of my transcendental activities, the penances you have undertaken to understand me, and your firm faith in me, all these are to be considered my causeless mercy. Purport. When a living entity desires to serve the Lord in transcendental loving service, the Lord helps the devotee in so many ways as a Chaitya Guru or the spiritual master within, and thus the devotee can perform many wonderful activities beyond material estimation. By the mercy of the Lord, even layman can compose prayers of the highest spiritual perfection. Such spiritual perfection is not limited by material qualifications, but is developed by dint of one's sincere endeavor to render transcendental service. Voluntary endeavor is the only qualification for spiritual perfection. Material acquisitions of wealth or education are not considered.
The Lord says, O Brahma, the prayers you chanted, the penances you performed, and your firm faith in me, all three of them are to be considered my causeless mercy. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, when a living entity desires to serve the Supreme Lord, Lord helps the devotee in so many different ways as Chaitya Guru, Paramatma from within, and Guru, spiritual master from outside. And thus one may perform many wonderful activities, just like one can see Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada's personal example is here. One can see example of Hanumanji, very intense desire to perform devotional service, and the Lord from within will help such a devotee. So much so that even Prabhupada says, even a layman can compose prayers. Mukam karoti vachalam, pangum langhayati girim, yat krupa, tamaham vande, Sri Gurum Dinacha Tarya. So what is required? What is required is the voluntary endeavors is the only qualification for spiritual perfection. So the spiritual perfection doesn't depend on one's wealth or education. They are not considered. But what is required is the voluntary endeavors. And that's why, we have seen this time and again in devotional service. People who are very qualified may not advance as much as people who are available. So being available is far more important than being qualified, right? So this is very, very important thing. Being available to our senior devotees, when being available for services, being available for sadhana, being available in the temple, being available. So being available is far more important than being just qualified or being just wealthy. Text 39. प्रीतोऽहम् अस्तु भद्रं ते लोकानां विजयेच्छया यदस्तौ गुणमयं निर्गुणं मानुवर्णयन्. Translation.
I am very much pleased by your description of me in terms of my transcendental qualities, which appear mundane to the mundaners. I grant you all benedictions in your desire to glorify all the planets by your activities. But a pure devotee of the Lord, like Brahma and those in his line of disciplic succession, always desire that the Lord be known all over the universe by each and every one of the living entities. That desire of the devotee is always blessed by the Lord. The impersonalists sometimes pray for the mercy of the personality of Godhead as of Godhead Narayana as the embodiment of material goodness. But such prayers do not satisfy the Lord because he is not thereby glorified in terms of his actual transcendental qualities. The pure devotees of the Lord are always most dear to him, although he is always kind and merciful to all living entities. Here, the word Gunamayam is significant because it indicates the Lord's possessing transcendental qualities. Hare Krishna.
Pritoham, I am very pleased, O Brahma. Bhadram te, all benedictions unto you. Lokanam vijayechaya. I am very pleased with your description of me in terms of my transcendental qualities. Right? And therefore, I grant you all the benediction in your desire to glorify all the planets by your activities. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that a pure devotee like Lord Brahma and those in the disciplic succession, they always desire that the Lord is known all over the universe by each and every living entity. So this is our passion. Make the Lord famous. Right? Make Lord famous everywhere. People should be aware of the Supreme Lord. Krishna should become a household word. Just like, Srila Prabhupada's ISKCON mission. Hare Krishna became a household word in just last 50 years. So this is the innate desire of a devotee to make the Lord famous everywhere. Impersonalists also at times glorify the Supreme Lord. They also pray to the Supreme Lord. But such prayers, which are imbued with so much of selfishness, does not satisfy the Supreme Lord. Because they are not glorifying the transcendental qualities of the Lord. Pure devotees, Prabhupada says, however, they are very dear to the Lord. They are always kind to living entities and merciful to others. And therefore, the word Gunamaya is significant because it indicates Lord's possessing transcendental qualities. So, Lord is called as Nirguna and Lord is also called as Gunamayam simultaneously. Nirguna means one who is beyond the guna, the three modes of material nature. And Lord is Gunamayam. Gunamayam means he is possessor of transcendental qualities, right? So, when the Lord is glorified with reference to his transcendental qualities, what is the foremost of the Lord's quality? Bhakta Vatsalata. This is the foremost, the first quality of the Lord is Bhakta Vatsalata. And when the Lord is glorified in relationship with his devotee, his affection for his devotees, and which is Śrīmad Bhāgavatam is full with, right? Then the Lord is Pritoham Bhadrastu. Is very, very pleased, awarding all the benedictions. Text 40. य एतेन पुमान् नित्यं स्तुत्वा स्तोत्रेण मां भजेत् तस्याशु संप्रसीदेयं सर्वकामवरेश्वर. Translation.
Any human being who prays like Brahma and who thus worships me shall very soon be blessed with the fulfillment of all his desires, for I am the Lord of all benediction. Purport. The prayers offered by Brahma cannot be chanted by anyone who desires to fulfill his own sense gratification. Such prayers can be selected only by a person who wants to satisfy the Lord in his service. The Lord certainly fulfills all desires in regard to transcendental loving service, but he cannot fulfill the whims of non-devotees, even when such casual devotees offer him the best of prayers.
So he says, my dear Brahma, your prayers are so wonderful. Ya etena puman nityam stutva stotrena mam bhajet. Anyone who worships me with these prayers chanted by you, Ashuhu, Tasyashu, very soon I am very pleased with him and all his endeavors are fulfilled. And Prabhupada says in the purport, all his spiritual endeavors are fulfilled. Right. So, this is the Falashruti of the prayers of Brahmaji's and the Lord personally giving. Prabhupada says here, the prayers offered by Brahma cannot be chanted by anyone for one's own sense gratification. Right. So they will satisfy the Lord in his service, and this is how they are not to the whims of a non-devotee or a casual devotee. But writes here, the casual devotees offering best of the prayers. So whenever we offer prayers, the mood should not be that it is said that these prayers will give this benediction and I will exploit those. This is a very, very on a sakama platform. Of course, to begin with, it is not bad, but as we advance in devotional service, we have to move on from, by the understanding the basic knowledge, we have to move on from this sakama to slowly becoming pure devotee of the Supreme Lord. Text 41. Purtena tapasa yajnair दानैर् योग समाधिना राद्धं निःश्रेयसां पुंसां matpriti tatvavitmatam. Translation.
It is the opinion of expert transcendentalists that the ultimate goal of performing all traditional good works, penances, sacrifices, charities, mystic activities, trances, etc., is to invoke my satisfaction. Purport. There are many traditionally pious activities in human society, such as altruism, philanthropy, nationalism, internationalism, charity, sacrifice, penance, and even meditation in trance. And all of them can be fully beneficial only when they lead to the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The perfection of any activity, social, political, religious, or philanthropic, is to satisfy the Supreme Lord. The secret of success is known to the devotee of the Lord, as exemplified by Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. As a good non-violent man, Arjuna did not want to fight with his kinsmen. But when he understood that Krishna wanted the fight and had arranged it at Kurukshetra, he gave up his own satisfaction and fought for the satisfaction of the Lord. That is the right decision for all intelligent men. One's only concern should be to satisfy the Lord by one's activities. If the Lord is satisfied by an action, whatever it may be, then it is successful. Otherwise, it is simply a waste of time. That is the standard of all sacrifice, penance, austerity, mystic trance, and other good and pious work.
It is the opinion of the transcendentalist that the ultimate goal is to invoke my satisfaction. Ultimate goal of yajna, dana, yoga, samadhi, everything is to invoke the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. Samsiddhir haritoshanam. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that there are many traditional pious activities. Just like we see, typically Annadan is there, philanthropy is there, altruism is there. That Mr. Adani, he is sponsoring entire, that Mahakumbha kitchen set up by ISKCON, and they are feeding thousands and lakhs of people during these 45 days. All of them can be fully beneficial when there is some siddhir haritoshanam. The Supreme Lord should be satisfied at the end. So the Prabhupada says this is exemplified by Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. On the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Arjuna was very reluctant to fight, being a gentleman. But he realized that this fight is personally arranged by the Supreme Lord. This fight is personally arranged by the Supreme Lord. And he realized that when by fighting this way, he can fulfill the purpose of the Supreme Lord. Then Arjuna gave up his reluctance in fight and fought the battle. And what was the result? Result is, of course, Dharmarajya was established on this planet, and the greater result was that 64 crore warriors who fought on the battlefield of Kurukshetra went back home, back to Godhead. Tathaiva channe naraloka veera ya ahave Krishna mukharavindam netrai pibanti nayanabhiramam. Right? Parthastra puta vadamapureta. That millions and millions of soldiers in one stroke were purified by the Supreme Lord and went back home, back to Godhead. This was made possible by Arjuna's giving up his reluctance to fight and following plan of the Supreme Lord to fight the battle of Kurukshetra. Therefore, one can see very easily that when we cooperate with the plan of the Lord, something impossible may happen through us even without our knowledge. And therefore, it is very important to cooperate with plan of the Supreme Lord and not to, not to have one's own mental concoction about the situations. Text 42. अहमात्मा आत्मानां धातप्रेष्ठ सम्प्रेयसामपि अतो मयि रतिं कुर्यात् देह आदि यत्कृते प्रियः. Translation.
I am the supersoul of every individual. I am the supreme director and the dearest. People are wrongly attached to gross and subtle bodies, but they should be attached to me only. Purport: the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, is the dearest in both the conditioned and liberated states. When a person does not know that the Lord is the only dearmost object, then he is in the conditioned state of life. And when one knows perfectly well that the Lord is the only dearmost object, he is considered to be liberated. There are degrees of knowing one's relationship with the Lord, depending on the degree of realization as to why the Supreme Lord is the dearmost object of every living being. The real reason is clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita 15.7. Mamai Vansho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhutaha Sanatanaha. The living entities are eternally parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. The living entity is called the Atma, and the Lord is called the Paramatma. The living entity is called Brahman, and the Lord is called Parabrahman, or the Parameshwara. Ishvara Paramaha Krishna. The conditioned souls who do not have self-realization accept the material body as the dearmost. The idea of the dearmost is then spread all over the body, both concentrated and extended. The attachment for one's own body and its extensions like children and relatives is actually developed on the basis of the real living entity. As soon as the real living entity is out of the body, even the body of the most dear son is no longer attractive. Therefore, the living spark or eternal part of the Supreme is the real basis of affection and not the body. Because the living entities are also parts of the whole living entity, That supreme living entity is the factual basis of affection for all. One who has forgotten the basic principle of his love for everything has only flickering love because he is in Maya. The more one is affected by the principle of Maya, the more he is detached from the basic principle of love. One cannot factually love anything unless he is fully developed in the loving service of the Lord.
Yeah,
In the
it is
present verse,
in
Hare
section.
Krishna. Yeah.
Now the Lord says, I am the super soul of every living, every individual. I am Paramatma. I am the supreme director and the dearmost. People are wrongly attached to the gross and subtle bodies, but they should be attached to me only. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that the Supreme Lord is the dearest in both conditioned state and the liberated state. He is the dearmost object of every living entity, and the simplest example for this Srila always gives is fish and water. The dearest object to the fish is the water, right? Where he is most naturally situated there. And one who knows perfectly well that the Lord is the only dearmost object is considered as liberated personality. Prabhupada says, why? Because the living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Mamai amshaha jiva loka. The, the living entity is amsha of the Supreme Lord. It's just like the sun ray is amsha of the sun God, right? Or Prabhupada says here, therefore, Jiva is called as Atma. The Supreme Lord is Paramatma. So Atma is part and parcel of Paramatma. Mamai vamsho Jiva loke, Jiva bhuta sanatanaha. Supreme Lord is Parabrahman. The Jiva is called as Brahman. So Supreme Lord is Parameshwara. And this Supreme Lord, whose every living entity is part and parcel Mamai Amshaha, therefore the dearest object for every Amsha is the soul, is the whole, and therefore dearest object for every living entity must be the Supreme Lord. In the conditioned state, one's body becomes the most dear because he thinks I am the body, and things related to the body slowly in the extended dimension they become dearer and dearer. But although we should be very responsible with our extended bodily activities, one should know that one's dearest personality is the Supreme Lord. And then one can actually love the Supreme Lord and love everyone else by keeping Lord Kṛṣṇa in the center. Otherwise, the flapping body is constantly changing, not only ours, even our relatives and the extended family in terms of one's jati, samaj, desh, humanity, so on and so forth. And without that principle of understanding universal fatherhood, somewhere else Srila Prabhupada writes, one cannot factually develop love for anyone. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Prabhupada, thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada, thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.